He who would trade liberty for some temporary security deserves neither liberty nor security. Hi everyone, this is Becca with Faith Exposed. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I want to shed some light upon a movement called the Dark Enlightenment. Now this was once just an obscure political philosophy that kind of lingered in the corners of Silicon Valley, but now it just seems to be creeping upon us really quickly, faster than many of us are able to understand it or work against it. So that's why I want to focus on it today. I'd like to help explain and break down what it is, point out its flaws, even expose the motivations behind the people who are pushing it on us. So we'll look at some questions such as, what is the Dark Enlightenment and why is it relevant to us? And I'm also quite curious about the alliance between modern evangelicals and this move towards technofeudalism that I don't think I ever would have predicted, but there's got to be some common values that's bringing them together. I think it does bring about a very dystopian end result that none of us will really want. Wikipedia describes it as a neo-reactionary movement that's anti-democratic, anti-egalitarian, and it's a reactionary philosophical and political movement. The term Dark Enlightenment is a reaction to the Age of Enlightenment and an apologia for the popular conception of the Dark Ages. The founders of this movement were originally these tech-minded libertarians. Libertarianism is a political philosophy that holds freedom, personal sovereignty, and liberty as primary values. They tend to be very conservative when it comes to economic matters, but very liberal when it comes to social cultural issues. They're not particularly religious. They emphasize the need for people to be free to be who they are and to do what they want. However, in practice, it seems like people really have trouble with letting those who they disagree with also have the same freedoms that they want for themselves. So it turns into this freedom for me, but not for thee mentality. When this happens, libertarianism ironically flips towards authoritarianism. And I think that's what we're seeing in this new right and the movement towards the Dark Enlightenment. So to get to the heart of what the Dark Enlightenment is, pretty much the vision is that we break down the current structure of the U.S. government and instead instantiate these regional tech CEOs or dictators who are just completely in charge of the people in their region. There's no democracy. It's these regional dictators who are appointed by the head king. Basically, it's turning even our personal lives into that feeling of being an employee at a tech corporation. And that's the type of situation that many people are trying to save up enough money so they can retire and escape from to regain their autonomy, except now there won't be an out. So it's really a techno-feudalism. So Elon Musk is one of the key figures who's been bringing about these ideas, and he's really been vocal about saying we all need to be working 120 hours a week. No one should be allowed to work from home. And he's even pushing for these corporate towns, which really set people up for slavery and full dependence on the corporation. They're even paid in money that can't be used anywhere else but in that corporate town, to where they have all control. While Elon Musk is busy dismantling the federal government, he's also been building his own private cities to surround his company headquarters in remote parts of Texas. In April, employees at SpaceX's South Texas location will vote on incorporating their private space tourism campus into its own city called Starbase. Now, at first, company towns sound really alluring. They brag about having, in-place childcare and their own restaurants nearby and stores, exclusive places to shop. But then the control of the corporation takes over your life, and it seals you into a place of dependence and near slavery. You're even paid in corporate bucks. So how do you leave a company town when all you have are company dollars that aren't good anyplace else? And we know that his expectation is for people to work 120 hours and eliminate work-life balance. Why on earth would we want to trade our lives of freedom for more corporate life? Curtis Yarvin is a 51-year-old ex-programmer and blogger He's one of the main promoters and representatives of this movement to eliminate all of the bureaucratic institutions. And interestingly enough, both of his parents were federal employees, and he really seems to have something against these institutions and all federal workers. So why should we care about any of this? Well, I wish we didn't have to. I truly wish we could dismiss all of this as some incel fantasy movement. But Curtis Yarvin has serious intellectual influence over key figures of Trump's administration, including Vice President J.D. Vance, Steve Bannon, and Peter Thiel, who's one of the major billionaire Republican donors. These people are close with Yarvin, and even though they don't have a personal connection, Elon Musk is carrying out a lot of Curtis Yarvin's strategies. VP J.D. Vance has cited Yarvin as an influence in 2021, saying, "So there's this guy, Curtis Yarvin, who has written about these things," which included the idea of RAGE, standing for Retire All Government Employees. This was written back in 2012 by Yarvin. And Vance has said this about if Trump were to become president again. "I think what Trump should do, if I was giving him one piece of advice, fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, and replace them with our people. And when the courts stop you, stand before the country and say, 'The Chief Justice has made his ruling, now let him enforce it.'" Now here are the key strategies that Curtis Yarvin wrote about. The first is campaign on autocracy, promote centralized strong leadership. Second is purge the bureaucracy, remove mid-level officials to streamline government. 3, ignore the courts, undermine judicial authority. 4 is co-opt Congress, align legislative bodies with the new regime. 5, centralize police and powers, consolidate law enforcement under federal control. 6, shut down elite media and academia, dismantle institutions that challenge the new order. 7, mobilize public support, rally the people for the regime. And 8, introduce technocratic governance, replace politics with corporate management. The goals of the Dark Enlightenment really seem to be what we're seeing play out in the Trump administration already, and they are well on their way to achieving these goals. So it has become an ideology that if we passively ignore, it will become our reality. Trump has become a central figure to evangelical Christianity. He's risen to the status of a prophet or a messiah, in many ways even larger than Jesus himself. So the Dark Enlightenment is essentially the surrender of the citizens' autonomy over to these tech CEOs. It is the allowance of even our most personal lives to be ruled over with the coldness and greed of a corporation, all under the PR guise of government efficiency. But when government efficiency becomes our overlord and requires us to give up our rights, our protection from corruption, and sells us out to corporate America, then perhaps it's time to start caring less about efficiency and more about the quality and value of our lives. Here's a clip of Curtis Yarvin during an interview with the New York Times where he speaks about J.D. Vance and his views on democracy.
How invested do you think J.D. Vance is in democracy?
It depends what you mean by democracy. I mean, I think that the problem is basically when people equate democracy with good government. When you use that word, you're using a very tricky word. I would say that what someone like, I'm on very safe ground, that someone like J.D. Vance believes essentially in the common good. And the idea that government should serve the common good.
So we see this tricky swap of words where he can't commit to saying the government should serve the people, but he has to specifically say the government should serve the common good. But we must ask the question, who does he have in mind will be determining what is good? Good means something to be desired or approved of. But who desires, who approves of? When we say that the government should serve the people, this means that everybody will get to have a reasonable amount of autonomy and ability to dictate the outcome that they want for their life. Whereas common good is eliciting an imaginary objective morality. They are positing that everyone just kind of knows, so it's really going to be specific people behind the scenes dictating what the morality is, deciding what's good. Now, I don't think this is an accident at all. I think this swap out of words was a way to transfer the power from the people to themselves. But when we understand that morality and these value judgments about what is good and what's bad are ultimately completely subjective, then we can see how this is a deceptive way of removing the ability to determine what is good from the average person and instead shifting it into someone else's hands. Presumably, this alleged superior leader will be the one who determines what is good for the common person. Or at least that's how they will make this shift happen, by giving the impression that this allegedly superior leader inherently knows what's good for the common person. And as with everyone who claims to know the true objective morality, they're really just mistaking their own subjective ideas of what's good and bad and thinking that they are part of this inherent standard. But when it comes to practice, we find out that not everybody agrees. This objective standard vanishes when different people have different ideas. So they are eliciting this imaginary concept of what's for the common good as if it's some objective standard that we can look to. But that doesn't exist. So there's somebody behind the scenes who's going to be making all of the decisions. And positing this objective standard effectively closes off any conversation between subjective agents, because what's the point in discussing all of this and weighing everyone's opinions when we can just access this objective morality? Subjective morality follows the bottom-up approach. The morality, the opinions, the values are inside each person, and the individuals are on the same level, and they negotiate with each other, discuss, agree upon shared subjective values, which they can put into law. This keeps the conversation open, and this is democracy, whereas objective morality is the dictator at the top pushing down what everybody should think and do.
Why are you guys so anti-dictators? Imagine if America was a dictatorship. You could let 1% of the people have all the nation's wealth. You could help your rich friends get richer by cutting their taxes and bailing them out when they gamble and lose. You could ignore the needs of the poor for healthcare and education. Your media would appear free, but would secretly be controlled by one person and his family. You could wiretap phones. You could torture foreign prisoners. You could have rigged elections. You could lie about why you go to war. You could fill your prisons with one particular racial group, and no one would complain. You could use the media to scare the people into supporting policies that are against their interests. I know this is hard for you Americans to imagine, but please try. I will tell you what democracy is. Democracy is the worst. Endless talking and listening to every stupid opinion, and everybody's vote counts, no matter how crippled or black or female they are.
Positing an objective morality always leads to imposing values and ideas on others, just like a religion. So I do think it's the case that any claim of objective morality brings us toward authoritarianism, because it shuts out the lights on the individual's subjective values, hopes, and desires. This mentality brings us to the Dark Enlightenment, where only very few number of people get to participate in the discussion of what's good. In Yarvin's plans, who will get to be the individuals determining what is good? It will be the tech autocrats like Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, and of course Yarvin himself. Can we trust them to put the interests of the lower classes on equal footing as their own? I wouldn't want to be in the position of needing to trust them with my well-being at the expense of their own. Another potential way to slip into a system of tyranny is actually through populism. And what can happen in populism is that a certain group of people start to say that, yeah, the government serves the people, but only we count as the people. And they come up with all these reasons to exclude others. And this turns into a tyranny of the majority. Yuval Noah Harari discusses that here.
But then the question becomes, who are the people? And what makes a person a populist is the argument that only we are the people. A populist party is a party that claims that all the people who doesn't support it are not really part of the people. And this is what you hear in extreme cases from, like in Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
So the Nazis would say anybody who doesn't support Hitler is not really a German. Mm-hmm. He's a Jew, he's a communist, he's a traitor, he's an alien. The key point of populists, which makes them dangerous, is that they don't think about the people as a collection of people, of individuals, of persons with different views and interests and so forth. No, they think about the people as this kind of mystical, unified body, which has a single will.
So how can those behind this movement get people to just give up their own say and their own power and hand it over to regional tech CEOs and some king? It seems to be through evangelical Christianity, because this fundamentalist religion has a lot of common core values that they can latch onto, and the common appeal helps them work towards the same goal. So they have evangelical Christians on board with them because of these three common core values. They distrust democracy because democracy forces them to allow other people to have differing viewpoints that aren't focused on their God and their church. And they need to share some of the lawmaking. And evangelicals are told that they might be punished if other people aren't obeying and worshiping their God. So there's a lot of fear in letting other people have opinions. And next is that they both highly favor the top-down approach rather than the bottom-up. Again, because bottom-up trusts the people to have their own valid thoughts and opinions. And the last core value we'll talk about today is might makes right. Both groups believe in giving up and forfeiting your own moral standards to adopt an authority figures. In Christianity, that would be God's. And in the Dark Enlightenment, that would be the king. Now let's focus on how both groups foster a deep-seated mistrust of our institutions. The direct supporters of the Dark Enlightenment build up this distrust of our institutions by simply exaggerating the flaws that are there and essentially making perfection be the enemy of what is good. And there is no discussing how to replace them with anything better that's proven to work. Our system now has been the result of hundreds of years of experience, and they think just burning it all down is the answer. In this next clip, the author Yuval Noah Harari discusses this concept.
This is the highway to dictatorship. Because democracy relies on trust, dictatorship relies on terror. When you sow distrust, when you destroy trust in all institutions, the only way a society can keep functioning is by becoming a dictatorship, because the dictators don't need trust. They use terror. If you don't believe any journalist, if you don't believe any scientist, if you don't believe the people in the election committee, then no democratic institution can function.
So we see the motivation behind why both groups want to distrust our institutions. The direct supporters of the Dark Enlightenment, such as billionaire tech people, they obviously want all of the power and wealth for themselves, so they want to convince other people to distrust these institutions that double-check their power. They want to sit at the top of a hierarchy and have us working for them, building their GDP and catering to their egos. Whereas evangelicals are promoting their religion, so they have a distrust of anything that is secular. They're actually deeply afraid of anything outside of their church because they're told it comes from the devil, and they worship a God who could randomly punish them for the sins of other people living in their own country. As we see, that has happened in many of the Bible stories, and that's why we also see Christians blaming homosexuals for tornadoes and earthquakes. It's this fear and terror of the God concept that they worship, that they're willing to just submit and give up everything to an authority figure in order to feel some sense of security and like they're in the right line of what God wants. A lot of the terror that evangelical Christianity gives off comes from the book of Revelations. I did a whole video on this topic, but it's about how taking this simple apocryphal text way too seriously is very dangerous and is currently causing tremendous harm to people in the Middle East. The Bible also talks a lot about purifying out anyone who is unholy or unclean. For example, Ephesians says, "But immorality or any impurity or greed must not even be named among you, as is fitting for saints. And there must be no filthiness, foolish talk, or obscenity, but instead thanksgiving. For this you know, that no immoral person or impure person, or one who is greedy, which is an idolater, has any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and of God. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these things the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience." So we can see how this type of thinking really invokes horror and a distrust for anyone considered unclean or anyone that's not in your particular religion. Evangelicalism has been a useful tool because of its core of immense distrust towards others and the desire to see the destruction of this world. Just an example of one evangelical family. My brothers and I were set up for a very traumatic home life because of the faith. Our mother had schizoaffective disorder, but the Bible told us that was caused by demon possession. Because of that, she had no actual psychiatric treatment while her 4 children were young. So evangelical Christianity set us up for a traumatic environment as it is, but we were also subjected to live performances that were designed to scare and traumatize us further into submission, such as this Heaven's Gates and Hell's Flames performance.
Angel, please, our names have to be in that book. Please, we weren't going to do drugs. We didn't mean to.
Don't bring us on, please!
Welcome to the party that never ends. Demons, get the girls. They're mine. I'm through with you.
We made a deal.
Deal? I don't make deals. I use you.
You lied to me!
Lie? Of course it was a lie, you fool! I am the father of lies! Demons, take this fool to hell! He's mine!
No!
We were told that this is actually something that will happen to us if we don't comply well enough. And I know the Bible says things like, do not be anxious or don't be afraid, but that's not how fear works. That's not how anxiety works. Simply being commanded to not be anxious or to not be afraid doesn't work. But the end result of all of these teachings is a whole lot of fear of both the wrath of God and demons and the world ending. And I can tell you that the end vision is that this world will be destroyed and all non-Christians that they consider to be impure will be brutally tortured at the command of Jesus. And these prophecies are thousands of years overdue. So there's this embedded intuition in these circles that we need to destroy our current institutions that were built upon the knowledge of man, and somehow that will trigger the return of Jesus. But the knowledge of man is all we have. It's this or nothing. Their God's not showing up. And all of this fear really causes one to be willing to give up their nice things, such as autonomy, in order to be fully complicit in this life to an authority that might bring them safety. Trump promises to be representing God and therefore able to bring them the safety and the purity that they think they need. And all they really need is a strongman leader type to convince them that God sent him, and they are willing to comply and give up freedom as long as they believe this person can keep them on the straight and narrow and eliminate the problem of all these impure people who might bring on God's wrath or take them off of the path to heaven. But this is, of course, silliness. No real wise God would punish one person for someone else's sins, and an all-loving God would not treat any of his children as impure filth. This is just divisive manipulation. And again, the blame is put back on the people. It's their fault. It's their fault that God has to do this. The most reliable, time-tested way to get people to give up their freedom is by making them seek security. And they can do that by manufacturing perceived threats and amplifying their fears. In order to soothe these fears, evangelicals look for destruction, and they want to purify away everything that's not in line with their holy text or that interferes with the power and influence of their religion. The next core value which binds together evangelicalism with this Technofeudalism movement is that strong preference for the top-down approach rather than the bottom-up. I think this is because of their growing distrust of the pluralistic society we have now. There's people with so many different opinions that it's harder for them to allow others the same freedom they want for themselves. We should let the individual's preferences rise up to the top rather than have someone at top pushing it down. And as we know, dictatorships correlate to top-down approach, and democracy correlates to the bottom-up. This top-down approach aligns very well with Christianity, given they have a God at the top and a strict hierarchy of pastor, church to men, men to women, women to children, and all of the values and ideas are supposed to come from the top first. It is not believed that those towards the bottom of the hierarchy can have very valuable thoughts to contribute. What's strange to me, though, is that top-down is pretty antithetical to the core values of the tech industry. Tech has become so successful and gotten to the point where they are now through more of a bottom-up approach based on freedom of information and open access to source code. Ideas are valuable in their own merit regardless of who came up with it and where that person is on the hierarchy. This is what has allowed tech to thrive, and if we start to work against those principles, it's really going to be the downfall of our innovation. I see the core values of tech really being set aside by these individuals who are starting this right-wing movement, such as Yarvin, who's a software developer, and Musk, Mark Zuckerberg. They are becoming complacent as their wealth and success has grown based on those principles. But when you start ignoring them, setting them aside, it's not going to keep going. They need to remember the ideas that help them to be successful. This open access to information, making educational attainable to everybody wherever they are in this social hierarchy. Instead, they're going out of their way to tear down these institutions that provide information to everybody. They're taking away funding to make sure it's equal opportunity. They're letting education become less and less attainable to the common person. But that is such a waste of talent and human potential when you're only letting those who are born into massive wealth have a chance at success and showing their ideas. These ultra-wealthy tech bros have completely lost sight of what brought them their fortune, and they are serving their own interests of seeing their own wealth grow rather than seeing the country grow. They are promoting an environment of fear by firing people, and they're making it a fearful thing to share your ideas and to bring up divergent thought. By deporting these Ivy League legal immigrants simply for criticizing their ideas on things like war or the way Trump is running his regime and censoring speech. And this is setting an example for other Ivy League or college students in general that they aren't free to share their ideas. This is going to be drastically harmful to our country's innovation and growth. There's no way around it. We're losing our scientists. They are using federal funding to control the scientists and the educators. Many are fleeing the country for this reason. Ideas need to flow freely. People need to not be scared to make a mistake or to criticize the wrong person. This is very similar to evangelical Christianity, which puts a tremendous amount of fear even upon the thought crimes or criticizing, doubting the church or the God concept portrayed in the Bible. This is not going to increase our GDP. And this is clearly because government efficiency is simply a guise for their greed and their desire to see democratic systems collapse so that all the power can fall into their hands, all the money and the wealth. All while disliking and distrusting the common person and pluralism, often expressing even feelings of disgust towards lower classes. Many of them were born into uber wealth, and they were programmed to think that they are superior. We need to check them and keep their power in balance. Limits on education, free speech, and access to information for the people are the most direct enemy to innovation and growth, and all of them are well aware of this. But the leaders of this new right movement are working under the excuse that these dictatorships will be more efficient and less bureaucratic. But any good tech mind knows that many times these barriers to speed are exactly what we need in order for a project to be accomplished well and durably with less time and resources spent overall. Else days, weeks, and months will be spent correcting errors from small bugs to massive design flaws. You will save time and resources in the long run by doing things properly, allowing checks and balances. Simple speed of implementation is not equivalent to efficiency. And these principles work for governmental systems as well. We need the checks and the double checks. We need multiple branches of government. We need agencies and institutions representing us in order for the government to run more efficiently with less corruption in the long run. Their thinking is so simplistic. They're like, why have 3 branches of government when you can just have one, the executive branch? We've learned these lessons already. Why do we have to learn them again? 250 years, the American Revolution, we learned these barriers to speed are also barriers to corruption. We don't expect them to be perfect, but they are good, and their quality is determined by who we elect. Let's not take away our ability to elect these people, and instead let whoever's the hungriest for power take over. And now DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, is setting aside all of this wisdom in exchange for methods that are known to fail. And the next core value that these groups have in common is the idea that might makes right. This means that moral principles bend depending on who's committing the act, which is unfortunate because often those who are most interested in abusing power are the ones who get themselves to that place. So they allow a lot of ethical leeway for those who have the most power, and the moral principles don't stand on their own. They depend on who's committing the act. Now, people having strong inner moral principles bodes well for the bottom-up approach and democracy, because democracy is a conversation and a negotiation between subjective agents. For an example of this might makes right idea being in play, ask yourself when evangelicals will stand up and speak out against Trump and the way he's bullying our neighbors, making them suffer for our own pursuit of wealth and resources. Ask yourself, when will they speak out? Will it be if we militarily invade Mexico, or if we take Greenland by force? How many Ivy League legal immigrants need to be shipped off to a slave camp in El Salvador before they speak out against him? Where is the ethical line, or is it completely bent because Trump is an authority figure? If you would have asked these very same people years ago, before Trump has entered politics, they would have said that all of these things are horrible things to do. But suddenly there's excuse after excuse for why it's okay for him to do this.
What was intended as a short vacation turned into a nightmare. German tourist Lukas Silaf was detained upon arrival in the US and hauled into a detention facility.
They put me in chains everywhere, around my stomach, on my hands, my feet. Then they put me in a van and drove me to the detention center in Satienko.
Lucas was...
Jasmine Mooney is a Canadian citizen who had a work visa, no criminal record, and had been traveling back and forth between Canada and California without any complications until she says she was suddenly detained without explanation at the San Diego border when she tried to reapply for a new visa. Writing in The Guardian, quote, "I was taken to a tiny freezing cement cell with bright fluorescent lights and a toilet. There were 5 other women lying on their mats with aluminum sheets wrapped over them, looking like dead bodies. The guard locked the door behind me."
Showing Ozturk being taken into ICE custody on a Somerville sidewalk by plainclothes agents. It sparked outrage and rallies in and around Tufts campus. Ozturk's lawyer says she's here on an F-1 visa and has no prior criminal history. The State Department claims Ozturk supports Hamas, pointing to an op-ed that she wrote for the school paper about Palestine.
And they support him for whatever he does. I very much respect those evangelicals who are speaking out against this, but that is not the majority right now. Just look at Trump cutting FEMA help, cutting down watchdog agencies in order to allow humanitarian disasters all across the globe. Tolerating this is might makes right being at play. It's being committed to accepting whatever behavior he displays because he claims to be an authority sent by God. So they forget all moral boundaries and they let him treat people like this. Even Canadians, Germans, legal immigrants are being fully disrespected by our government. We're just surprisingly revoking people's immigration rights because of their viewpoints expressed on social media. They're fighting to surprisingly revoke citizenship from those who were born in America through birthright citizenship. We're fighting to strip U.S. citizens of their rights just because their parents had fled to America from another country thinking that they would be treated better here. But boy, were they ultimately wrong. They're also fighting to remove protection of violating the rights of people with alternate gender identities. Whatever happened to loving the sinner, you would think at least their human rights would be protected by evangelicals, even if they don't agree with the lifestyle. Never trust someone who wants to be a king and demands loyalty. And with evangelicalism, might makes right. So it's okay for God to drown babies and animals in the flood and abandon people in hell for eternity if they didn't know him, permitting slavery and the stoning of women and children, as well as many of the other atrocities committed in the Bible. This is where we see subjects surrendering their own moral principles and adopting this ideal that might makes right. So if you have the power to do something, you also have the right to do it. I can't think of anything more antithetical to morality. So anything these certain authority figures do is considered good. Let's wrap up by taking another look at the 8 steps to the Dark Enlightenment. 1 is campaign on autocracy, promote centralized strong leadership. And Trump is certainly running on the platform of autocracy and being a strongman leader, which is a nicer way of saying a dictator. Purge the bureaucracy. Remove mid-level officials to streamline government. We've seen that for sure. Hundreds of thousands of federal employees just being fired, no questions, not even understanding what it is they do, just firing them. Ignore the courts, undermine judicial authority. We've seen that happening here and there as pertains to how they're handling deporting these legal immigrants. Co-opt Congress. Align legislative bodies with the new regime. They're certainly working on that. Centralize police and powers. Consolidate law enforcement under federal control. We haven't gotten to that step yet, but hopefully we can prevent it from ever happening. Shut down elite media and academia. Dismantle institutions that challenge the new order. 100% this has begun. Number 7, mobilize public support, rally the people for the regime. They may have wanted this to happen, but it doesn't seem to be the case. The people rallying seem to be those protesting and opposing the regime. And the final step, introduce technocratic governance. Replace politics with corporate management. Nobody wants that but those at the very top of capitalism. Please, let's make sure we don't ever let them get to that step. If you are an evangelical and you don't think that you align with these core values that I discussed here, then please, by all means, prove me wrong. Show us that obedience to the authority of your political party is not your highest principle. Show us how you, as an evangelical, are willing to set boundaries and stand up for the rights of those you disagree with. I encourage you to decide ahead of time and very consciously what lines are you setting that you will not let your government cross in regards to humanitarian values. Are you okay with people being put into deportation camps without going through due process? Are you ready to allow this from your political party? This is why we need to work against external religious programming and instead listen to our own values. These contrived fears coming from Christianity and political movements are causing us to accept a shittier life outcome than necessary. We can demand better for ourselves and for the people around us. We just won't survive very long if we can't evolve past the morals displayed in the Bible. So ask yourselves if this sounds like the words of a divine creator or simply a tribe of men imagining a war god. See, the day of the Lord is coming, a cruel day with wrath and fierce anger. I will put an end to the arrogance of the haughty. Their infants will be dashed to pieces before their eyes. Their houses will be looted and their wives violated. See, the day of the Lord is coming, a cruel day with wrath and fierce anger. I will put an end to the arrogance of the haughty. Their infants will be dashed to pieces before their eyes. Their houses will be looted and their wives violated. People can change their minds through reason and empathy. We can dissociate from our previous identities. I know I did. I completely changed as soon as I saw the glaring flaws in evangelical Christianity. We can't pick and choose who we want to count in democracy, because as soon as we start allowing that, it's a matter of time before someone above you will decide that you don't deserve to participate. Democracy is a conversation, but the conversation is currently being flooded with bots.
That the easiest way to capture people's attention is by spreading outrage, by pressing the fear button, the hate button, the greed button in people's minds. And this is what they began to do already 10 years ago and more. And this has destabilized democracies all over the world. It is destroying the democratic conversation. Democracy in essence is a conversation. Dictatorships is dictate. One person dictates everything. Democracy is a conversation. And now we have the most sophisticated information technology in history. Mm-hmm. And yet the conversation is breaking down. People can't talk to each other. People can't listen. They can't hold a reasoned debate. They can't agree on any facts. Why? Because one, it's not the only reason, but the main reason is because the algorithms are manipulating us.
Those who have enough power to influence the social media algorithms are dismantling our ability to have quality conversations. And it's all for their own benefit, their own lust for power, and even more money. This is exactly why Musk didn't bat an eye when it came to losing billions of dollars in purchasing Twitter. We need to outsmart the algorithms. We need to be stronger than these powerful people and strengthen the systems of protection from corruption. Artificial intelligence and robots are slowly taking away our leverage as laborers. So it's imperative that we have good, caring people in charge who care about every person, even the vulnerable. Well, that's all I have for today. I truly hope I've been able to give a helpful perspective on these things. And I thank you so much for listening. Until next time, bye.